Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we'll create our first Hello World application using JPA. We will store Hello World in the database and we'll read same from the database. So before we start our application, let's try to understand what are the main components we need in our application. So basically there are three main components. One is the persistent class, second the persistent unit, and the third is logics to store and retrieve data from database. So here persistent unit contains the configuration to connect the database. Like something, if you are connecting to a database, then you need the connection URL and the credential to connect a database. The same kind of configuration we need in our application, and that is stored inside the persistent unit. Suppose you want to communicate with multiple database. In that case, you have to create multiple persistence unit in your application. So here, right now, we are only communicating with the single database. So we need only one persistence unit. And persistent classes, where the persistent classes are something like we are storing data and retrieving data with the help of those classes. Those are the persistent classes. So in our application we are storing message to the database, right? So message.java will create one Java class that is called the persistent class. So to make a class persistent, we have to follow some standard rules that I will be explaining in this video. And the third one is the logic to store and retrieve data from the database. So here the logics will use the persistent unit and the persistent class to store data in the database and retrieving data from the database. So this is the overview of the Hello World application using JPA. So without delaying, let's start our application creation. So I will create a new project in IntelliJ. So you can use any ID whichever you want. So I will name it as Hello World JPA and Hibernate. Okay. So I will use Maven. In my system I have JDK 17. So rest others we need not to change anything. We'll just create. Okay. So so before we start, we need to add the dependencies which are required in our application. So basically here there are two dependencies are required. One is Hibernate, the another one is the driver. As you know, we cannot use JPA directly because JPA is just a specification. We need an implementation of that. So we are using here Hibernate for the implementation and the driver. So driver basically uh, uh, helps us to communicate between the application and the database. So for that reason, we need driver. So we'll include those two dependencies here as of now. So Hibernate Entity Manager. So this is the version I will use. All the latest version I will use here. And next is MySQL connector. Yeah. Okay, fine. So these are the two things we need for our application. Apart from this, I would like to include another dependency that is related to the JUnit so that I can test the application. So that I will include JUnit Jupyter engine. Yeah. So the version I will use, any version you can use. So this is done. Okay. Now, now we'll create the persistence unit. So the persistence unit is nothing but persistent.xml. So that is a XML file that contains all the DB related thing along with some other configuration. So that we'll create. So to create that XML file, we need to create another folder inside resources. So by default, resources is created inside main. So inside resources, we need to create another folder meta.inf. I will create new directory meta-inf. So inside meta-inf, I will create that persistence.xml file. New file. Okay. So the reason why I created the structure like this, because this is the standard we need to follow. JPA has provided this standard we need to follow so that we can build our application to communicate with the database. We cannot have this persistence XML file some other places. No, it has to be there inside the meta-inf. So after this, these are the configuration I have added. That is, so the persistence unit name I just put it as test. You can put it as some other name as well. And this database URL, if you see, this is the URL I put it as. And this is the test is the schema name. Don't confuse with the persistence unit name and the schema name. You can have any schema name, whatever your wish. So, so in my system, I have this schema test. So I have written test here. So the username is root and the password is admin here. Okay, these are the configuration. I'm using MySQL 8. So for that, I have included this one and this Hibernate show SQL in the console. I wanted to see the SQL queries that are created in the backend. And I want this format SQL so that whatever the console I see the SQL that should be formatted. And the other property is Hibernate SVM to DDL auto. That is basically the creation. I have given the rights to the application that it would create tables whatever required for the application. So the user, the developer, no need to create in the database. It will be created automatically when the application starts. So this is the persistence.xml. This is basically called the persistence unit. So for us, it is only one persistence unit if you see, because we are communicating to the single database. Suppose we want to communicate multiple database, then we need to define multiple persistence unit in our application. Okay, now next thing what we'll do is we'll create persistence class. Okay, so I will create a Java class message.java. Okay, fine. So I have created this class. So inside the persistence class, I have to create some fields that is required to store the message and retrieve message. So for that reason, I will create private something like this text so that I can store a text hello world in the application private string text. Okay. Now what else I need? I will just create the setter and getter for that. And I need one more thing, that is the primary key. So private long ID. So this is the primary key that I wanted in my persistence class. Suppose there are multiple instances of message are there, and if multiple instances has same primary key, then those are pointing to the same rows in the table. So if the primary key, that is the ID, is different, then you can say that it is pointing to multiple records. Okay, if the ID is same, then it is pointing to the same record. Okay, so we'll discuss more about this primary key, this ID primary key in our upcoming videos. For now, you just understand this is just a primary key and it should be unique so that we can identify the unique records in our application. Okay, because hello world I can store two times, three times, four times. For each time it will generate multiple primary key. So apart from this, I have to make this class as persistent class. So I will add persistent, that is entity annotation here, so that this class can be persistent. So apart from this, what I have to do is I have to annotate this one ID, and one more thing I need to add, generated value. And the strategy I will define as generation type dot identity. Okay. So that's all. So we'll create setter and getter. I'll just right click, generate getter and setter. Okay, it is created. Fine. So as of now, we have completed two components. That is, one is persistence unit, the other one is the persistent class. Now the remaining thing we have is the logic to retrieve and store data into the database. So that we'll create now. So I will just move this private text to up so that here it is get test get ID set ID. Yeah, fine. Okay. Now I will create a unit test case just to verify that we can store and retrieve data from the database. Java class. Okay. So inside the test, we'll create one method. So what I will create is public void store message. That's it. Should work. And here I will annotate with test. Okay. So to start with this, we need the entity manager. So if you see here in our pom.xml file, so Hibernate entity manager we have used. So we'll create this entity manager at the beginning. Entity manager factory. Okay, entity manager factory equal to persistence dot create entity manager factory. So here we need to pass the persistence unit name. Okay, so the persistence unit name we have defined inside the persistence.xml file. That is at the line number 7. If you see test, okay, so that we need to pass it here so that it can create the entity manager factory with those details, basically those credential whatever we put it here of database. With those it will create this entity manager factory. Okay, so this is done. Okay, so we'll write it later. Let's finish this on the try block first. So the entity manager em equal to entity manager factory dot create entity manager. Okay, now we'll start the transaction. Dot begin. Okay, so we have created this entity manager from entity manager factory. So after that we started the transaction and we started creating an instance of the message and we set the text as hello world. It's a kind of container if you can say. So after that we'll try to persist this one. So once the persistence is finished, we'll commit this one, git transaction let commit. So this will do the job. So first we have created factory, then we created the manager, then we started the transaction. After that we set the value inside the persistence class. After that we saved the persistence class, and after that we committed the transaction. Okay, so I will open my database. So right now if you see there is no table created. Okay, so there is no table inside it. So just the schema name test. So I will use that one. That's it. So let's run this application. If you see in the console message, so the URL whatever we have passed inside the persistent XML, that is printed here, and the username and password whatever we have used, that is also, you can see it here. Okay, so if it is checking whether the table already exists, so the message table already exists. If it is there, then it will drop the table. Okay, after that it will create a table. Okay, if you see here how it has created the text varchar 255 and the primary key as ID. That's how it is created. After that, what it does is it has inserted one record into the message table. If you see here, insert into message text. Okay, so text is the property that is there inside our message.java class. So now let's go to the database and check whether it is created. Okay, we use test, select star from message. See, hello world is stored inside the message table. Okay, so that is one thing. So now we are able to store the message inside the table. Now what we'll do is we'll try to fetch that message from the database. So we'll write a query to retrieve message from the database. So what we can write here is entity manager dot create query, select m from message m. So here we pass message dot class. Okay, and there is a list. In the list we'll be getting this one. Okay, we'll just create local variable test message. Okay, that's it. So we have created this query. It will retrieve the message from the database. Now we'll just validate the message what it has retrieved. So we'll just print this message for its text. That's it. Will we want the application would print hello world in the console. That's it. So let's run this application. Okay, so we have missed the system.out.println here. So that's the reason it is not. System.out.println. So inside that we'll put this external get test. Okay, now it should print. Okay, if you see here at the end, it is printed as hello world. So as of now, we have stored the message and retrieved the same message from the database. So this is our first application using JPA. So in upcoming videos, we'll see more about it. That's all. Thank you.